Uh, our next book up is called Sounder. And I picked this because the boy and his father are sharecroppers. It is a little bit before our Roaring Twenties time period. It's the late 19th century, so the late 1800s. But I wanted to offer you a glimpse of that perspective, since we know that that is or was a profession that many people in the South were in, and they couldn't necessarily get out of it. Let's see. Sounder traces the king's sorrow and abiding faith of a poor African American boy in the 19th century South. The boy's father is a sharecropper, struggling to feed his family in hard times. Night after night, he and his great coon dog, Sounder, return to the cabin empty-handed. Then one morning, almost like a miracle, a sweet-smelling ham is cooking in the family's kitchen. At last, the family will have a good meal. But that night, an angry sheriff and his deputies come, and the boy's life will never be the same. What? Where did you get that permanent marker on you?
It was a blue marker.
Okay, well, right now I can't deal with that because I'm reading these.
It's right here.
Well,
Can I get it off?
hopefully, but I'm reading my video right now.
Okay, can I get it off soon?
Hopefully. The tall man stood at the edge of the porch. The roof sagged from the two rough posts which held it, almost closing the gap between his head and the rafters. The dim light from the cabin window cast long, equal shadows from man and posts. A boy stood nearby, shivering in the cold October wind. He ran his finger back and forth over the broad crown of the head of the coon dog named Sounder. "Where did you first get Sounder?" the boy asked. "I never got him. He came to me along the road when he wasn't more'n a pup." The father turned to the cabin door. It was ajar. 3 small children, none as high as the level of the latch, were peering out in the dark. "We just want to pet Sounder," the 3 all said at once. "It's too cold. Shut the door." "Sounder and me must be about the same age," the boy said, tugging gently at one of the coon dog's ears and then the other. He felt the importance of the years as a child measures age, which separated him from the younger children. He was old enough to stand out in the cold and run his fingers over Sounder's head. No dim lights from other cabins punctured the night. The white man who owned the vast, endless fields had scattered the cabins of his sharecroppers far apart, like flies speck on a whitewashed ceiling. Sometimes on Sundays, the boy walked with his parents to set a while at one of the distant cabins. Sometimes they went to the meeting house, and there was school too, but it was far away at the edge of town. Its term began after harvest and ended before planting time. 2 successive Octobers, the boy had started walking the 8-mile morning and evening. But after a few weeks, when cold winds and winter sickness came, his mother had said, "Give it up, child. It's too long and too cold." And the boy remembering how he was always laughed at for getting to school so late, had agreed. So imagine he had to walk 8 miles morning and evening to get to school. Can you walk 8 miles to school and then home? It's a lot of walking. Besides, he thought next year he would be bigger and could walk faster and get to school before it started and wouldn't be laughed at. And when he wasn't dead tired from walking home from school, his father would let him hunt with Sounder. Having both school and Sounder would be mighty good, but if he couldn't have school, he could always have Sounder. "There ain't no dog like Sounder," the boy said, but his father did not take up the conversation. The boy wished he would. His father stood silent and motionless. He was looking past the rim of the half light that came from the cabin window and pushed back the darkness in a circle that lost itself around the ends of the cabin. The man seemed to be listening, but no sounds came to the boy. Sounder was well named. When he treed a coon or a possum in a persimmon tree or on a wild grapevine, his voice would roll across the flatlands. It wavered through the foothills louder than any other dog in the whole countryside. What the boy saw in Sounder would have been totally missed by an outsider. The dog was not much to look at. a mixture of a Georgia red-bone hound and a bulldog. His ears, nose, and color were those of a red bone. The great square jaws and head, his muscular neck and broad chest showed his bulldog blood. When a possum or a coon was shaken from a tree, like a flash, Sounder would clamp and set his jaw vise just behind the animal's head. Then he would spread his front paws, lock his shoulder joints, and let the bulging neck muscles fly from left to right. And that was it. The limp body, with not a torn spot or a tooth punctured in the skin, would be laid at his master's feet. His master's calloused hands would rub the great neck and say, "Good Sounder, good Sounder." In the winter, when there were no crops and no pay, 50 cents for a possum and $2 for a coon hide bought flour and overall jackets with blanket linings. But there were no price that could be put on Sounder's voice. It came out of the great chest cavity and broad jaws as though it had bounced off the walls of a cave. It mellowed into half echo before it touched the air. The mist of the flatlands stained on whatever coarseness was left over from his bulldog heritage, and other flute-like red-bone mellowness came to the listener. But it was louder and clearer than any purebred red-bone. The trail barks seemed to be spaced with the precision of a juggler. Each bark bounced from slope to slope in the footholds like a rubber ball. But it was not an ordinary bark. It filled up the night and made music as though the branches of the tree were being pulled across silver strings. While Sounder trailed the path that the haunted had taken in search of food, the high, excited voice was quiet. The warmer the trail got, the longer the silences. For by nature the coon dog would try to surprise his quarry and catch him on the ground, if possible. But the great voice box of Sounder would have burst if he had tried to trail too long in silence. After a last, long, sustained stillness which allowed the great dog to close in on his quarry, the voice would burst forth so fast it overflowed itself and became a melody. A stranger hearing Sounder's treed bark suddenly filled the night might have thought there were 6 dogs at the foot of one tree, but all over the countryside, neighbors leaning against slanting porch posts or standing in open cabin doorways and listening knew it was Sounder. "If the wind does not rise, I'll let you go hunting with me tonight," the father spoke quietly as he glanced down at boy and dog. "Animals don't like to move much when it's windy." "Why?" the boy asked. "There are too many noises and they can't hear a killer slipping up on them, so they stay in their dens, especially possums, because they can't smell much."